fundamental Palestinian rights, because any state that's admitted without acknowledging the right of return, or if a state, if a non-existent state of Palestine takes a seat at the UN and replaces the PLO, then you've also disenfranchised the Palestinian diaspora as well. Many individuals have written about this as well, including myself. And the Boycott National Committee in Palestine, the BNC, which is the steering group of the Palestinian-led boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign, issued two statements that I think are very important on this. And they make 2 points, or they each make a crucial point. One is that regardless of what happened in September, the nature of the struggle doesn't change. That simply declaring a state doesn't magically change the balance of power, and therefore the emphasis has to be on the continued boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement that I'm going to come back to. The second point they make is that because of the vague and risky legal gamble that this initiative could take, it could end up displacing the PLO as the official representative of the Palestinian people. Now, why is this important? It's not that the PLO is doing a great job of representing Palestinians. It isn't. In fact, the PLO has been taken over and hijacked by exactly the same people who run the Palestinian Authority. And there is no independent PLO that operates free from the Palestinian Authority. That's the reality today. But nevertheless, there is a broad consensus among Palestinians that the legal framework of the PLO remains the legitimate forum for representing Palestinians everywhere, Palestinians within Palestine and Palestinians in the diaspora. And there is a broad aspiration. It has not yet turned into a concrete movement, but it is being widely expressed that Palestinians should regain popular and democratic control of the PLO and restore it as a truly representative and legitimate body. But for that to happen, the status of the PLO has to at least be protected. And people are very afraid that replacing it with the so-called State of Palestine could endanger the status of the PLO. So those are the 2 points made by the Boycott National Committee. Now, just to come back to, so, you know, what is the alternative? You can listen to all this and think, well, all of these initiatives aren't going anywhere. Does that mean there's no hope at all? And I think that actually the opposite is the case. I mentioned in the first part of my talk that I think Uri Rosenthal's attack had to do with more than just even controlling Dutch civil society and imposing a government agenda on it. But the particular focus on BDS showed that the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement is gaining a great deal of steam and support and momentum, and this is now being fought at the highest level. And I think that it might have achieved the opposite effect, because probably most people in the Netherlands had never heard of BDS before Minister Rosenthal's advertising campaign about BDS. But the job of activists and solidarity groups is now to go and say to people, well, you heard about BDS, but what is it and how does it work and how can you get involved? And there's some wonderful literature on the table that's a start for anyone who's new on, for example, which Israeli goods to boycott at Albert Heijn when you go shopping. And I don't know if BDS Nederland are here today, who run the BDS Twitter account. But if you're on Twitter, BDS Nederland tweet many times a day particular products in particular stores that you should not buy because they're made in Israel. So there are many ways to kind of popularize this effort. But I think it's important to remind ourselves why BDS is so powerful and how it contrasts with the statehood, so-called statehood bid. It's the polar opposite. Whereas the statehood bid is unclear and fuzzy, doesn't have clear goals and references, whereas even if it succeeded, there's no visible mechanism by which it results in actual change on the ground, and whereas there's no popular consensus about it, the situation with BDS is the exact opposite. So first of all, what is it? Some of you know this very well, but others may not. In 2005, almost 200 organizations representing the full spectrum of Palestinian civil society, including every single political faction in Palestine, but also labor groups, student groups, cultural groups, really everyone, professional associations, issued a call to global civil society to impose boycotts, divestment, and sanctions on Israel, similar to what was imposed on apartheid South Africa, until Israel recognizes the rights of the Palestinian people and international law in three particular respects. One, an end to the occupation and colonization of Arab land, occupied in 1967. Second, an end to all forms of discrimination and guarantee of equality for Palestinian citizens of Israel. And third, respect for and implementation of the right of return for Palestinian refugees. All fully compatible with universal human rights principles, and none of those principles violates in any way any legitimate right of Israelis. Israelis have a right to live, to have all the human rights of everyone else, but they don't have a right to exclude people and deny them of their rights just because they're the wrong religion or wrong skin color or wrong ethnic group. Nobody has that right. No one on this, in this world has that. No other state claims such a right. So the BDS, the demands of the BDS call are very clear. The mechanism is also clear. By isolating Israel the way apartheid South Africa was isolated, we raise the cost of the status quo for Israel. Why is that important? Because as long as Israel enjoys complete impunity and immunity, it can do what it wants. Who has forgotten one of the most savage images that came from Operation Cast Lead? When Israel was bombarding Gaza, what was to me not the images of the dismembered bodies of children, as horrifying as they were. To me, the most savage and brutal and chilling and unforgettable image is when the 5 European Union prime ministers went to Jerusalem and were joking and laughing and being photographed with Ehud Olmert while the white phosphorus was falling on Gaza. That's the image I can't get out of my mind. Because what message does it send? It sends to Israel the message that we, the leaders of Europe, and we, the people of Europe, support what Israel is doing. What message does it send when the UK, after it was discovered that Israel was forging British passports and stealing the identity of British citizens in order to commit murder in Dubai, after that, the British rushed through changes in their laws so that suspected Israeli war criminals can freely travel to the UK without fear of arrest by an independent judiciary. In other words, European societies have gotten to the point where they're prepared to sacrifice the independence of the judiciary, to sacrifice any commitment to human rights, all for the sake of one little country, Israel. Nobody else gets this special treatment. One of the things the Israel lobby always says is, we should stop singling Israel out. Why are you focusing on Israel and not on anyone else? I agree. We should stop singling Israel out for special treatment and treat it like every other country. And nobody has done more work on documenting the complicity of the European Union than David Cronin, who we're going to hear from later. But this is why BDS is so important. If Israel can have 5 prime ministers come while they're committing crimes against humanity in Gaza, if Israel can be integrated into NATO, into the OECD, into the European Union's scientific funding structures, if it can get its association agreement enhanced, if it has a blank check from the United States Congress, if all of the Arab states continue to maintain their complicit and subservient position towards Israel, then